Díomh Cordia agus fáilte arás. Hello friends and welcome back to the Cray Cree podcast. It's Elaine Nagul. I am Elaine Doyle and it is with deep heartfelt gratitude that I welcome you back to this sacred space. How are you getting on, everyone? Yeah, I really hope everyone is keeping well as we make the descent into Samhain, into winter here in Ireland. And I'm just sending you so much love, so much gra agus banach love and blessings from this sacred part of the world, which is Gunde Kerry, County Kerry, in the beautiful Emerald Isle of Éire of Ireland. And I am, really grateful and excited to be sitting, recording, and sharing this sacred space with you all during this very magical portal, which is Samhain. So before we get stuck into today's episode, just inviting just a moment of presence here. So just taking a long, slow, deep breath, if that feels good. Perhaps in through the nose and out through the mouth. And just allowing yourself to fully land here. Calling all fragments of your soul and energy back into this present moment now. And allowing your awareness to go from your head deep into your heart and your body. And just allowing yourself to be fully present here for the next hour or so. And to receive that which your soul came to receive. So just coming into the body in the present moment before we get stuck in. I'm really excited to sit down and share my heart musings because there is so much swirling right now. I'm sure all of you are feeling it. And, just to give a bit of context, we are approaching Samhain. So Samhain this year, astrologically, is on the 7th of November. So the portal is starting to open. And we're feeling that intensity of that when the veil is thin, where we can feel our ancestors that have passed. And we can feel the shadow work that is coming up to be looked at. So in today's episode, I want to speak into healing our wounded inner child, ancestral traumas, and shadow work. Because this is the perfect time to talk about this as we enter the Samhain portal. So I'm just going to put a bit of a disclaimer that this is going to be raw and deep. So if this is not the time for you to listen to this podcast, maybe pause and listen to it another time. But I'm definitely feeling the depths of where I need to go in today's episode. And I actually felt a little bit nervous before I sat down, which I never do, really. So, let's see what comes through. To honest get to meanier, I am excited. So yes, as I said, Samhain, meaning it's an Irish word meaning summer's end. So this is a time where we say goodbye to the brighter half of the year. We are now on the descent into the darkness. And it was yesterday, I think, that the clocks went back. So it's now 5:05 and it'll be dark in a half an hour. So the days are getting really shorter, right? And colder. And I know I talked about this a little bit in the last episode where, this is a time where our ancestors would have started to slow down and rest and cocoon and stock up, reserve their energy. Just like the trees do. The trees shed their leaves and they go into a state of hibernation like the animals as well. Thinking of the hedgehog, just sleeps for months. Who would love to just do that for a couple of months, huh? I certainly would. Yeah, and we bring that energy into our lives and into our inner world by slowing down and looking at what really needs to be shed this winter season, especially around the Samhain portal, because the veil is thin, and that gives us the opportunity to tap into what ancestral traumas and pains in my lineage do I need to let go of this winter and this Samhain portal. And it's also the beginning of the Celtic New Year. So it's a really good time to look at what are we shedding and what intentions do we have for this new cycle ahead. Anyways, I could spend an hour talking about Samhain, but I'm not going to do that. I do have a meditation and activation for Samhain that I recorded last year, and you'll find that on my podcast if you scroll down. But I just wanted to give it a little bit of context as to why I'm going to talk about what I'm going to talk about, which is deep shadow work, healing the inner child, and how that's related to ancestral trauma. And if we are really living by the cycles, I don't use artificial lighting. So once it gets dark, I'm doing very little. I'm doing minimal because I'm just using candlelight. I'm not out and about. I'm saying no to things. So I'm slowing down a lot. And, I've actually been sick the last week and I was bleeding and I spent a lot of time at home, and so much stuff comes up when we slow down. And that is why a lot of us, for a lot of our lives, were in our wounded feminine and wounded masculine, and we were busy and disassociating, because to sit with the level of pain within us can be really difficult. It can be really difficult. But what I've learned is that when we actually go in there and sit with it in the darkness, when the evenings are getting dark, it actually can move. That energy and that pain can move and be finally released. And it's not as scary sometimes as we think it is, So yeah, this is a perfect time to step away from the external world and, like nature, just pull back into ourselves and bring deep healing to ourselves and love to ourselves during winter. It's a magical, magical time to tend to ourselves, to do a lot of self-care and nourishment and baths and self-massages and cooking nice, nourishing food, and really looking at what is not love within me, within my lineage, that is really ready to be released now. If you are here in this sacred space, you're remembering that this is a lifetime that you chose to, heal the trauma within your lineage, within your body, within your heart. You're here for a big reason, which is to change the vibration of the planet through your own healing. It's as I have always been saying, it's a prophesized time where we would come and remember how to live within our heart spaces. A newer, the age of heart, whatever you want to call it. It's a very pivotal and important prophesized time on planet Earth. And, that requires a lot of devotion. I've talked about this a lot of devotion to healing within us everything that is not truth and everything that is not love. And a reminder that you're doing absolutely great at all of this. Because, I think when we're on the healing path, there can be like, okay, there's more, and we go to deeper depths and more layers, like the snake shedding its skins. There's more shit. There's more stuff. It's a lifelong journey, and I believe it is anyways. And it goes through many lifetimes where we get ready to ascend or awaken. I've spent many lifetimes just preparing for this lifetime. So I just want to remind us all that we're doing amazing and just honouring how far you've come and that your ancestors are dancing and that you are their answered prayer. So just remember that. Yeah, for sure. It's really important. We're doing amazing. Just going to have a drop of tea here. So yeah, as I said, I was a bit sick there. I don't even like that word. I was purging. So if there's coughing and spluttering, I do apologise, but I just knew I had to sit down today and share some of the things that have been, circling my heart and body. It's been mad time. So, where to start, lads? Where to start, lads and ladies? Okay. Firstly, have you ever heard yourself say, oh God, I thought I dealt with that stuff. I thought I healed that. I have definitely found myself saying that many times, and I hear my clients saying it all of the time. Right? Oh Jesus, I thought I dealt with me wounded inner child. I talked about it in therapy. I thought it was done. Okay. That is not our higher self speaking. Our higher self trusts the process and knows these things take as long as they need to take. And our higher self understands that we're going to deeper depths, deeper layers. So it understands why things arise, a year later or 2 years later after we might have looked at it. Okay, so I really believe our higher self trusts the process. I'm sure you'll have that experience as well, where your higher self is like, no, I trust that there's more there. And the part of ourselves that's like, oh my God, thought this was dealt with. That's not actually our true self speaking. That's actually another wounded part of ourself that feels like we need to be fixed and healed in order to be loved. Right? And the reality is, we are always loved. God, Goddess, the divine source creator, spirit energy loves us. Always. No matter whether we're in a process or we're healed or not healed. And our loved ones, the people who are meant to be in our lives, love us just as we are. Even when we're within the process. So it's really important for me to say that, because what I'm about to speak into, my ego is like, I really thought I dealt with this. I really thought I'd spent enough time loving myself for this part of me not to be present. And that is not the angle that we need to take, because what that is doing is pushing our wounded inner child or the wounded parts of ourselves further away from the light, because we're basically saying, I don't want you. I thought you were sorted. Why are you still in pain? And if you think about your child, for example, imagine saying that to him. I thought you were healed. What's wrong here? I thought I sorted you out. So we have to become extremely mindful of our language when it comes to healing, and need to be very mindful of when we are in our ego or the wounded mind or the wounded part of ourselves that feels we need to have control over our healing. This is a path where we need a lot of humility, being humble and being like, okay, I see you. The part of me that has never felt love before, I see you. and come into my arms, sit down here, and let me cocoon you with so much love. And I did an initiation with my friend Elise at the start of the year called The Way of Love. And that was one of the biggest things I got from it was we need to love our shadow. We need to love the wounded parts of ourselves, because not loving them is not going to work. It's not going to heal them. We have to embrace them, and we at least have to accept them. Okay? So that's really important. That is how we start with inner child healing or ancestral trauma. Loving those parts of ourselves back into wholeness. So what is inner child healing? So inner child healing is healing the parts of ourself that were traumatized or spoken badly to or have received any sort of pain or trauma as a child, because in psychological terms we believe that those parts of ourselves still live within our psyche. Okay, so it's not like you're a child and then you're an adult and it's two separate people. It's all the one. So I am my 6-year-old self, I am my 12-year-old self, I am my 15-year-old self, 22-year-old self, 30-year-old self, and now 36-year-old self. I'm all of it. And inner child healing is looking at the parts of our inner child that were wounded that now need to be healed because they're affecting how we are as a 36-year-old. And, you know, my background is social work, and then I became a cognitive behavioural therapist and also a life coach. So a lot of my work for probably the guts of a decade was around really looking at inner child healing and working specifically with children a lot in hospitals and schools. So it's my area of interest, and I hate to say expertise, but it was for a long time. And I mean, why did I become a social worker? To help other children? Well, actually it was unconsciously I needed to heal my own inner child, right? That's sometimes what we do. We go into careers and jobs to help others when we actually need to help our own inner child. So inner child healing is healing the wounded parts of ourselves from our childhood. And, you know, this can extend into our teenage years or early adulthood, or exploring any area in your life where you've experienced trauma that needs to be healed. Okay? So how is this connected to ancestral trauma? Well, I really believe that, I mean, this has to be truth. Well, I'm not going to say anything has to be truth. This is my truth. Cray McCree, musings from my heart. So, ancestral trauma. What is ancestral trauma? This is trauma that we carry from our ancestors. And it is said that we hold trauma from 7 generations back. So it gets passed on to at least 7 generations. And also the gifts get passed on, and the gifts will heal the trauma, okay? So, you know, for example, even like the egg that became Elaine was inside my mother's womb when my mother was inside my grandmother's womb. Okay. So like if there was any pain that my grandmother experienced around then, I feel that because I was literally in her womb when it happened. So that's like an example of how it's in our cells, like it's in our cells. And I'll do a whole other episode specifically on Irish ancestral trauma. But the reality is, right, all ancestral trauma in our lineage is manifested in our childhood. So whatever, you know, because people are like, how do I know if that's ancestral trauma? Well, what was your childhood like? You know, if we just simply break it down, our childhood will tell us what traumas are in our lineage. How loving were your parents? Were they abusive? Was there sexual abuse? Was there physical abuse? Was there abundance, or was there a lack mentality? Were people connected to the land, the trees, the herbs? So that will give us an insight into our gifts and our traumas if we just look at our childhood. So for me, everything, it's because your parents were the people who brought you into this world and who parented you. So whatever they were holding in their lineage, trauma-wise, they passed on to you during childhood. And as I said, Samhain is a time of the ancestors and looking at ancestral traumas and gifts. So let's just go straight into the childhood, where all of it is manifested. Most of it is manifested. Okay. Yeah, it's a big topic, you know, and I think some of the things that I'm probably going to say that I've said before, and I know I do repeat myself, but it's important, as I said, because there's many layers to this, and we don't just talk about something once and it's healed, unfortunately. Not yet, anyways. So I suppose, given my background that I talked about, and now I'm, you know, I don't identify as a social worker or that anymore, but I'm very passionate about healing and awakening and coming back into love and coming back into our hearts. And for me, it is extremely important. One of the most extremely important things is healing our inner child. And sometimes it's overlooked in spiritual offerings or communities because it's so basic. But I think that's such a bad word. It's not basic, but it's so like, oh, we all know that. But it's like, but how are your inner children doing though? Because if they're not healed, they're ruling the show from a shadowy place. So it's like, you know, I think a lot of us over the last few years have gone off and done, well, I have many different modalities and pilgrimages and plant medicines and all these things in the external. And it was like, some of the most important things we can do are so simple, actually, which is looking at our wounded inner child. So just this reminder that it's coming back to the simplicities, and it's not easy, actually, and that's why a lot of people avoid it with other busying themselves with spiritual practices, because it can be very traumatic to look at the abuse and pain and trauma that we've experienced as children. Okay, and you know, the reality is, I've never met a person who doesn't have some sort of pain from childhood or trauma. And maybe I mentioned this in the last episode, but you know, trauma isn't like a car accident or being in the war or yeah, being physically abused. Trauma can be not being breastfed, or when your breastfeeding stops, or it can be simply living in a household where people weren't living in their hearts. Growing up in a matrix where going to school, like school for me was very traumatic. Big groups of people, a lot of dense energy. It was, yeah, I mean, there's so many reasons I don't like school, but so all of us in some way have experienced trauma because we've grown up in a world where people weren't living from their heart. So that's trauma in itself. Okay, so that's important to say. We all have something. Yeah, and for some of us, some of it is more dense than others. And I would have said this before, a lot of us on the healing path right now, for our generation, we actually experienced a lot of disconnection and trauma because through healing those wounds, we are able to help others heal it because we've been through it. The path of the wounded healer, it's called. And it's like, oh gosh, not for my kids though. They're not going to experience that. I'm going to love them so much and protect them from the kind of shite we had to go through. But look, that was our generation. We had to take that on. We had to be the ones who would bear the pain and heal it for the next 7 generations at least. And what a beautiful, magical, intense journey it is, you know, grateful for all of it. So, yes, you know, personally on my journey, I actually started off healing childhood trauma. And I remember, I had to go for therapy as part of my training anyways, but I remember I was in my 3rd bout of therapy and I was in Dublin. And I remember the psychologist, I was telling her a bit about my childhood and she was like, oh right, I think this is going to take longer than the 6 free sessions that I can give you. And I was like, first of all, don't make that reaction to my life. Like, I would never do that to a client, but anyways. And I was like, okay, I can do this. And I have been in long weekly therapy for 4 years, 5 years maybe. Um, so this is, I'm just putting it out there that this is, for some of us who've experienced a lot of pain growing up, devoting ourselves to a long-term piece of work with a professional is highly advised, highly, highly advised, whatever works for you, whatever your thing is. I mean, I journal a lot. I have a deep connection with God and the land and the elements, but working with a professional for me, given the experiences that I've had, has been absolutely essential. And I think, it's important to say here that one of the ancestral traumas in Ireland is a difficulty spending money on things that are actually good for us. Maybe I've mentioned this before, but I see it all the time. I noticed it within myself at the start of my path, and then I quickly had to change that because I knew I needed to invest a lot of my money in my spiritual, emotional, and physical well-being. People were like, oh, I can't afford the therapy yet. They're driving or whatever your car that costs, I don't know, 20, 30, 40, 50 grand. We really need to be mindful. And it's even, I see it in the spiritual community. We really need to allow ourselves to invest money in things that are really good for us, especially like our emotional, physical, and spiritual health. Max out the credit card if you have to. I don't suggest that, but if you have to, I've done it many times on my path. Money comes back in eventually. So allow yourself to have professional support. So, as I said, I've been devoting myself ever since really 2011. I really was like, why have I ended up in an abusive relationship? I really need to do everything I can to heal myself. And recently, especially during the past week or two, and I know I talked about this when I was living off grid as well, but the last week or two I've really felt this absolute depths of pain within me. And for the first time, I think, maybe ever on my path, I felt the depths of the pain so deeply that I actually questioned myself. I was like, and I feel emotional even talking about it. I was like, will I be able to get to where I need to be in this lifetime, given the depths of pain within me related to my inner child? That is how I was feeling this past 2 weeks on this lead up to Samhain. During my bleed, I was like having to meet parts of myself that were so frozen to love. Like, love couldn't even get in there because my heart had become so protected, like parts of my heart. And, usually when I'm bleeding, so during a woman's bleed, oxytocin, which is the bliss hormone, is released. So usually I'm like feeling the love from the mother and the land and God, and I'm just like, oh, this is amazing. But this bleed, I was like really finding it hard to feel the love because different parts of me were triggered over this past while that brought me into this frozen place of like disconnect. And I just wanted to explain that a bit. Okay. And just to say, now that I've come out of that, I'm like, of course I'm going to get to where I need to be. And when I'm present, I'm already there. Luckily I've had really powerful moments where I feel at one with all that is, at one with God when I'm meditating usually, where I'm like, oh, this is my natural vibration and frequency, which is love and light. I am, in this moment I'm healed because I'm fully present and I'm not in the pain body. Okay, so it's like Eckhart Tolle, if anyone's read Eckhart Tolle's book, through presence, we come home to God, basically, or to oneness. And the thing is, like, I'm not in that state all the time. And that's where we drop into the pain body, which Eckhart Tolle talks about. And the pain body is within us, and we have to be present with it when it's there, instead of distracting and disassociating ourselves. We have to be present with it and feel it. So it was very hard for me to feel it, but I did. There was a lot of crying and journaling and releasing, because the walls that were built around our heart have to fall away. Okay. And that's what I want to get into, is what some people call parts work. Okay, so why are parts of my heart closed off to love? What happened to me as a child that I'm not able to feel love in this moment? Okay, so parts work is, there's a part of ourselves, usually, a very young part of ourselves, that had to shut ourselves off from love to be safe. Okay, so I'm going to give an example of this, right? This is where it's going to get down into the depths of trauma. So, for example, say somebody is obese and really hates themselves. So if they grew up and say that they were sexually abused by their father, that one of the reasons they started eating a lot and becoming overweight and hating themselves is because they thought then that their father wouldn't abuse them if they weren't in the vibration of love and they were overweight. Okay? So when we honor that part of ourselves that was trying to protect us from abuse, that's when we can start to feel love. When we have a chat with the protector part of ourselves and say, I understand that you were trying to protect me, but it's now safe for me to actually come back into my heart and to be loving and to love myself again, because that's not going to happen now. I'm out of the home. Okay, and that's what I've been journeying with. Not that specific example, of course, but I had to really journey with the parts of myself that had to shut herself off from love. Okay. So if you grew up in an emotionally abusive environment and you were the scapegoat and everything was blamed, you were blamed for everything, even when you did nothing wrong. So this was my example, was feeling that, like, okay, well, if I'm not my vulnerable, crying self, then I won't get in trouble. So I'll shut off being in my heart, because that means I'm vulnerable, because I'm a rising Pisces Cancer moon. So I was very, very emotional child, but that wasn't accepted, or they didn't know how to deal with that, which is, of course, ancestral trauma coming through the parents, where emotions are not safe or okay. So I shut off that part of myself. So I shut off being in my heart because it got me in trouble and it wasn't safe. Okay. So we have to have a chat with that part of ourselves and say, I understand that you were trying to protect me there, but it's actually now safe to come back into my vulnerability and to come back into my heart. And for you and for your experience, it's going to be different reasons why you had to shut yourself off from your heart or from your authentic self, right? There'll be different reasons that you grow up with. But just knowing that this is a core wound of humanity, this isn't just me and you, this is like the majority of the world have been cut off from their hearts. This is why there's war still present in the world, okay? So this is a core wound of humanity where we've been disconnected from love and from our hearts. And, when I start working with clients, they're like, I find it hard to come into my heart. I can't feel anything. And I'm like, yes, because we've been cut off from our heart. And there's actually a lot of pain there and walls there that we need to work at first. And it took me years of healing, shedding the shit around my heart to actually really feel the love from God, from the divine, the infinite supply of love within my heart flowed once again when I'd cleared a lot from around my heart. Or if you're really good at meditating or love being outdoors, you can feel the love from the divine even when there's a lot of pain around it. There's no rules, but I'll just share my experience. And as I've said, one of my main missions is to birth love into the world, to journey back to love, to come home to love. And so I'm very aware of when I'm not in the vibration or love, or I'm struggling. And that's what recently has brought me back to doing a lot of work with my inner child, because I realised it was parts of her that were getting triggered through relationships, and then that would freeze up my heart again. Mirror work, where romantic relationships will bring you straight into your wounded inner child. And when I look at my past relationships, or I'm even around my friends now who are in relationships, and they're like, oh my God, it's their wounded inner children that are literally in relationship now. Like, that's who I hear fighting, that's who I hear communicating, because they've triggered their wounded inner child, which isn't our higher self, which isn't our 36-year-old self. It's wounded parts of ourselves. So if we don't heal our wounded inner child, it's going to come into our relationships, and it can literally ruin our relationships. It can ruin our relationships. So we got to do this work. I think so many people out there, I want to be in divine union, and I want my beloved, and I want this amazing relationship with a man or a woman or whatever. And it's like, you're only going to get an amazing relationship if you have an amazing relationship with yourself. In my opinion, in my experience, this thing of loving ourselves, firstly, I believe to be true. If we are not in right relationship with all aspects of ourselves, it's impossible to be in this, fairy tale relationship with our lovers. And look, no relationship is ever going to be fairy tale. Like, there's always going to be issues. But when we're tending to ourselves, our relationships will be a lot smoother. And I'm reading a book by Anaya Sophia called Sacred Sexual Union, and she talks about like a divine union between a man and a woman, or a woman and a woman, whatever the romantic sexuality is, or the romantic preference. Both people need to be in union with God, or walking with God. Now, if you don't resonate with the word God, spirit, the divine. And to work with the divine, to walk with the divine, means that we look at our shit. So a relationship is not going to be healthy unless both people are really devoted to God. I fully believe that. It's very hard to be in a relationship with someone if they're not doing the inner work. And Eckhart Tolle talks about this in one of his books. You keep doing the work in yourself and not project the other person to have to do it, but hopefully they will do it in time. And if they don't, then you have to make the decision whether the relationship is viable or not going forward, So one of the reasons why I've been forced into this work, for many reasons, but one of it is because I do really, really want to have children. I really, really want to have children. And I know the spirits that want to come through me as babies need a man who is in his power, and who is my beloved, and who is doing the work. And for me to, I have to step up and match his energy. Like, if I want this amazing person and this amazing man, I have to become that as well. Okay, so it's like, a friend gave me a reading recently, and it was like, in order to like resonate with your beloved's energy, you're going to have to come into deeper love and worthiness within yourself. And I was like, fuck, are you serious? I thought I'd done this. That was my ego, not my higher self. Yes, there's like, I think I'm going to have to do a part two for this because I've been already speaking for like 45, 50 minutes. So I might need to do a part two. Let's see how things go. Part two, coming soon, maybe. We'll see. So, where was I? Where was I? Yes, relationships, worthiness, love. Yeah, let me just take a second. So, yes, worthiness, relationships, love. One of the ways we can analyze how our inner child is doing is by looking at the people in our lives. What kind of friendships do we have? And what kind of patterns do we have in romantic relationships? That will be a sure sign. So, if your friends are loving and trustworthy and loyal, they are mirroring that energy within you. So if they're loving towards you, that means you have a good level of love towards yourself. Okay, but so that's a good way to analyze our how our wounded inner child is doing. Another way to analyze it is how loving are we towards ourselves? Like, are we very harsh on ourselves? So if we are harsh on ourselves, that's usually the voice of a parent growing up that was hard on us that we've now internalized. So that can be that there's inner child healing needed around being more loving to ourselves and less harsh. And I have all of these things, you know. There's lots of here. I could literally be speaking for hours about different inner child woundings, but yeah, then we have to journey to those parts of ourselves that became hard on ourselves in order to protect ourselves. So it was like, you know, if you grew up in an ambivalent home where if you did something wrong, you got in a lot of trouble, you became really hard on yourself, so you wouldn't do anything wrong, so you wouldn't get in trouble, or you wouldn't get bet up or sexually abused or whatever it was. So there's a part of yourself that, this is the parts work that actually is hard on yourself, was hard on yourself to protect yourself from abuse, but that's no longer, you're no longer living in that home environment. So yeah, perhaps I will do a meditation for the podcast where we can do a meditation around how we journey to these parts of ourselves. I do with my clients all the time, like, okay, journeying to that part of yourself, having a conversation saying, I thank you for trying to protect me during that time, but I no longer am in that unsafe home environment and I now want to love myself. So like asking the protector part of yourself to calm down. I really hope this is making sense. The parts work, very, very, very important, because I really recommend Teal Swan. She does a course on self-love and she talks about a lot of inner child healing on her videos on YouTube. Teal Swan. She knows a lot about ancestral Irish traumas as well. I know she's going to be in Ireland this weekend, so she definitely is tapped into the collective here. But she talks about how, and this is very important actually, is, you know, if you're to go out on the land, right, for any of you who sow vegetables, and you have this year's crop that you pulled up, and the dead roots are now there decaying in the earth, right? And if you were to not pull them up and till the soil and prepare it, next year's seeds wouldn't grow. So if you didn't dig up the old dead roots and just went out and sprinkled the new seeds, nothing would grow, right? And that's how she kind of compares it to the healing journey. You can do all the self-love affirmations you want and sow the seeds of love, but if you haven't taken up the dead roots, the self-hatred is going to come back. It's going to come back and it's going to come back until you deal with it and pull them out and look at it. And this reminds me, sometimes maybe this is why we're like, God, I thought I dealt with that. Did we really deal with it though, or did we kind of brush past it and try to cover it up with self-love affirmations? Did we really look at it? Did we really allow ourselves to journey there? So that's important. You know, this is the excuse me, the disclaimer bit, which is like, this is the depths we have to go to. We have to sit with the pain. We have to journey to the parts of ourselves that were abused. Let me just take a second to get some tea there. My throat needs a break. Okay, so like, and you know, when we look at that, what does it mean to sit with it? It can just mean like journeying to the part of ourselves that was, you know, emotionally abused or whatever it was as a child, and just crying and feeling that pain, crying. In therapy or in a circle or when you're journaling, like just allowing her to cry. Because a lot of us growing up, we weren't even allowed to cry when we got in trouble or we were abused. So crying, releasing the tears, pulling it out, seeing, as I said, the parts work, seeing, we have to dissolve the protector part of ourselves, or else it'll keep coming up, because that part of ourselves thinks that the self-hatred is a good thing because it's going to protect us from getting in more trouble. So journeying and having a chat with the protector parts of ourselves. And I worked with maybe I'll put the details in the notes. I worked with a woman called Mags Fitzgerald, who's Irish and lives in Bali, and she really helped me with the parts work. The whole session was around journeying to the parts of myself that were protecting my heart, but it wasn't serving me now. And once I did that session and really looked at dissolving the protector parts of myself that were blocking love in, I finally was able to leave where I was living, which was no longer serving me, and move to Kerry. Because, if we grew up in environments where there was no positive affirmations and we were only ever spoken to when we did something wrong, we feel absolutely shit about ourselves. We feel shit about ourselves and we have no self-worth. And if we feel shit about ourselves and have very little self-worth, it's very hard to live our dream life, because we don't believe it will work, or we don't think we're good enough, or we don't think we're worthy enough. So if you're stuck in some area of your life where it's not flowing, that can be a call to looking at our wounded inner child. How are they feeling? Because, for me, I can get into this idea of myself. I'm amazing, and I'm doing so much great stuff, and I'm like a beautiful person, and all of that is true. But there is some very wounded parts of myself that I need to acknowledge, or else I'm not going to get to where I need to get to. So it's about being very humble, right? So if you have me on the pedestal, take me off the pedestal, because I am maneuvering just as much shite as anyone else, Yeah, I think people would probably be surprised. I don't know, would people be surprised or not, but I don't know if I've used this example before, but I remember I was over in my friend's house in Wales last year, and they live on this amazing piece of land and this beautiful house, and I was in the kitchen cooking. I was like, oh, if I had a kitchen like this to myself, I'd cook all the time. And my friend was like, you're worthy of somewhere like this. And I was like, yeah. And I really had to sit with that. It really penetrated me. I was like, is there a part of me that doesn't feel worthy? And then it was like, oh wow, there's a massive part of me that doesn't feel worthy. And, as I really mother myself here in Carter in Kerry, one of the reasons I'm here is to really mother myself. And when I tuned into recently, do I feel worthy of my beloved? I was like, right now I don't. And my higher self does. Of course, you're an amazing person. You deserve your beloved. The wounded parts of me were very present, but very, very unconscious. Below the ego, below the 36-year-old self, was this very wounded part of me that didn't feel worthy. So I think a lot of the things that aren't flowing in our lives, or that we haven't manifested, we have to see is there a part of ourselves that is blocking that coming in. right? And another example of this is like, I think Teal Swan used it in one of her videos, like if someone is having difficulty getting pregnant and they've tried all the things, you know, there could be a part of themselves that, you know, because their mother was very abusive towards them, that a part of them feels like they're going to be a bad mother. So they're protecting themselves from not getting pregnant because they think they'll be a bad mother. So there's a lot of unconscious things that we need to bring to the light because they can be holding us back in ways we can't even imagine. Okay. Yeah. And I was talking about earlier about how, you know, how to analyze how your inner child is doing. And one of the big ways, of course, that I mentioned is our patterns in romantic relationships. Okay, so I'm just going to be, maybe I've talked about before, I definitely talked about one of my major relationships in my first ever podcast episode. But I'm just going to give you, I'm going to give you a little breakdown here, right? So my first long-term relationship, I was 18 and I was in that relationship for 5 years. And it was very emotionally abusive and at times physically abusive and sexually. Okay, so that's my first big relationship. I had a boyfriend before that, Christopher, and he cheated on me. But we were in school, you know, so but I remember it being very traumatic. So then my second relationship, abusive, he also cheated on me. And then I was in another relationship about a year later. And I thought this was it. Like, he was from a good farming background in Kilkenny. And I was like, oh, this is it. This is it. He's the one. We'll come back from Australia and we'll be engaged. And he also cheated on me very traumatically. We were out in a pub together for Patrick's Day. And he was kissing another woman while I was in the same pub. I was like, what the fuck have I attracted in here? Right. And then I was single for a decade. And within that time, well, nearly a decade, you know, there was men here and there, but nothing long term. Like, I was in love, but not long term, you know. And then I fell in love with a beautiful person who, yeah, left me then to get back with his ex-girlfriend. And I'm just thinking of my other relationship. And my most recent relationship, which I have spoke about, was, as you can probably hear, the most healthiest reciprocal relationship I've ever been in my lifetime, and I was 35. And yeah, like any man that I've been with has cheated on me or left me. And it's not easy to say this out loud, but it reflects my own inner state of love, doesn't it? Well, that's what I believe, which is like, and I knew the guy I'd met, my 2 boyfriends ago, that was an amazing love. Like, I really felt a massive amount of love there, and I knew I'd attracted him in because I had journeyed so much deeper into love within myself, but it still wasn't healthy. You know, there was still aspects that weren't right, weren't in integrity. And then my most recent relationship, I mean, that was last year we met, and I'd done a lot of work on myself. So, of course, my external relationships were going to mirror that. But in many ways, it wasn't the love that I need in order to birth children. Not that it wasn't the love, that's a really wrong way of putting it. It's not he wasn't, obviously, we weren't beloveds. And I know a part of me feels unworthy. I felt unworthy because now I'm like, I am worthy of my beloved, right? So, yeah, I wanted to say that out loud to show you that there's a reason why I'm absolutely devoted to this path. It's because I have to be, because I can't be in any of those relationships that I was in before. Like, I feel very emotional now. I had to pull myself out of the pit that I had found myself in. And it was in 2011 when I broke up with that abusive boyfriend that I was like, oh fuck, I need to do everything to figure out why I was in this relationship and how to heal myself, you know. And I do it for my children to come, yet to come. So there's a reason why I'm obsessed about this. There's a reason why I'm not always on Instagram and I'm not always pumping out offerings, and I'm not always, because I have to devote a lot of spaciousness to my own process to really, really tend to my inner child that really, really just needs to be loved and told that she is worthy of all that she wants. And yeah, I believe that, you know, they are core wounds for a lot of us. And maybe it wasn't as extreme as mine, or maybe it was even more extreme, you know, depending on your childhood. But yeah, they're core wounds of humanity that, you know, Louise Hay really talks very much into in her book, How to Heal Your Life. You know, she said the core wounds that create a lot of disease mentally, physically, emotionally for humans is not feeling good enough. I'm not enough. Not feeling worthy, not feeling loving, not being connected to their heart. So these are our core wounds for a lot of us. And, you know, I mean, I grew up in a middle class family. My parents are amazing. They're amazing. However, they were holding, and, you know, I've had many conversations with my mother about this because she's very tuned into family history and ancestral trauma now. And she's like, I know I passed things on to you and I'm sorry. And I said, Ma'am, like, I forgive you and I understand. You parented how you were parented. This is not about blaming, but it is about acknowledging, okay, that shit went down when I was a child and it wasn't good and it wasn't loving and I need to heal it. And I'm just being reminded now of an episode that I did last year, which is called, I think it was Divine Love in the New Earth or something like that. And I spoke about this man that I met. Matthew was his name, which means gift from God. And I talked about this in the episode, but he was looking at me. He was seeing all the wounded parts of myself. It was so intense, and I knew he was seeing those parts of myself. That's eye gazing, really powerful practice. It'll bring you right into the wounded parts of yourself. Eye gazing with another person, that is, or even with yourself in the mirror. And he said, how is your inner child doing? And I was like, oh, she's in a bit of a jock. She's not in a good place. And he was like, love her and heal her, because you don't want to manifest love in your life from that jock place. So I'll say that again. How is my inner child doing? He asked. And I said, not in a good place. And he said, don't manifest love from that place. So if there's a part of ourselves that is really like dense energy, part of ourselves that was maybe sexually abused, that's one of the most dense energies, or physically abused or emotionally abused. If we don't look at that and heal it, that is a magnet to romantic relationships. So that's why I would have, since my inner child hadn't been taken care of, she was the magnet to the men in my life. Okay? It's called trauma bonds. It's magnets, and I talked about this in other episodes, but it's, yeah, it's a magnet. The wounded parts of ourselves are magnets to other people who have the same sort of trauma. You know, and sometimes we can be attracted to people because of that, and it can work out well, but not in my experience. Not in my experience. And, you know, we're never going to be, there's always going to be parts of ourselves that need to be brought further into love and light, but there's a threshold that we need to get to, that I need to get to in order to call in really healthy reciprocal love, you know, in our relationships, in our romantic relationships and friendships and in community. And I've come a massive way since that abusive relationship. I was hanging around a really bad crowd, and I have some of the best people in my life now, the best people on earth. I feel I'm absolutely blessed, and that's a reflection of the work I've done. Absolute devoted. And my next thing now is, okay, coming back into more of my natural vibration of love and frequency and worthiness, really seeing myself. Like, there's many times, like, other people see my power before I ever even seen it myself, and I'm still learning to see myself. Someone will say something nice about me and I'm like, oh, I actually need to hear that. And that's not a good place to be forever. Always needing external validation. So I'm doing my best to really see myself, like I am doing my best each and every day, loving myself, seeing myself. And, that's the importance of a healthy tribe and community who will love you and see you and help you to get to that place. Thank God I'm not hanging around with people who don't see me or love me. They're like, Elaine, you're amazing. And they're continuously motivating me to share and to serve. You're so powerful. Keep doing it. Keep going. We need that support when we're coming out of a very disconnected place. So surround yourself with loads of people who will reflect back your magic and your medicine when you are unable to see it. So healing the wounded inner child is so important. And for me, it's like a marriage and a balance between, I think self-love affirmations are so powerful, but we need to make sure we're also doing the shadow work. If not, as Teal Swan says, the self-hatred and the pain will continue to come up because the roots haven't been pulled out. So it's a balance between the shadow work and the love and light work, which is like, for me, when I meditate and I connect with God, with nature, with Mother Earth, I feel my natural vibration of love. When I do my affirmations, I have my hawthorn tea, my rose tinctures, I'm around my friends, I feel my natural vibration. So I do that a lot. When I do my soul work, when I serve others, I feel the light of my soul healing all pain within me. So that all of those things are really important. Doing your soul work, sharing your medicine, meditating, being out in nature, plant medicines. But we also need to be doing the shadow work. And I do think this simple shadow work can be overlooked in spiritual circles sometimes. And it's all love and light. And it's all these, distractions to actually getting down and dirty, getting into the wounded inner child. Nobody, I suppose a lot of us, it's hard to go there, and when we see wounded inner child woundings in our loved ones, please be compassionate towards it, because they're just mirroring back to you your own stuff. I see it in communities where people push each other away. I talked about this in a recent episode. Don't push other wounded inner child away unless it's abusive and unhealthy. Take space. But we need to, if we're in love with someone, we need to love all parts of themselves, even the wounded parts of themselves, if it's a healthy relationship, of course. Please be patient and kind with our own wounded inner child and our wounded inner child of loved ones. Yes, what else? So that is, that is my plan for the winter here in Kerry. I'm going to really root down. I've got my self-love affirmations that I painted onto pieces of paper, but not paper, like proper paint, cardboardy paper that I'm going to stick up around my wall. And I'm really going to burn myself into love, really come into deep worthiness, really look at the parts of myself, continue to journey. A simple practice is when you're meditating in the morning, invite all the wounded parts of yourself, your little inner children, to sit with you. And this was something Mags told me, was to like picture them and pour the Christed light, the vine light, into them. So just imagining that you are pouring so much love and light into them. Just simple practices of raising their vibration. And we do this after we dissolve the protector parts of ourselves, which I spoke about earlier on. Yeah, so I think that's Shine for now. Yeah, watch this space. I might come back with a part 2. I'll see how this lands and sits for me and if more needs to be expanded on. Please reach out if there is more that you want to hear. Like, there's many episodes I've done and I'm like, God, I could have talked about this for hours. If there's a topic that you're like, I wish you could speak more about this, please reach out on Instagram or Facebook Messenger. I don't always have the capacity to reply, but I read all of your messages and I really love reading your messages. So please keep them coming in. It is just beautiful to hear your stories and hearing how much my story resonates. I just love to hear that. So giving deep gratitude to you all for journeying with me, hearing my story, witnessing my story, and for being brave enough and courageous enough to come down into your heart and do this healing work. I am proud of you all. What else? Yes, so as a thank you for everyone's support and for joining me in this sacred space, I want to offer a discount code for my podcast listeners for any of my offerings this winter season. So I'm going to offer 30% off any of my offerings. So the code, I'll put it in the notes, will be podcast 30. And you'll see all of my offerings on triplespiralhealing.com. What I'm obviously really passionate about is shadow work, healing. So I have counselling and coaching sessions and mentorship programs to help with that. I also do in-person ceremonies, retreats. So that 30% is available on anything you want. Just put in, I'll make sure that that's on the website tonight. And I'm going to be taking on extra one-to-one clients for the winter because it's such a powerful time to do shadow work. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to show up more for my community, offer more sessions. So if you are interested, you'll see my email on the website or just give me a message and we can go for there. I do free discovery calls for people who are interested in working with me but are not sure which sessions to go for. What other admin? So I don't always get the chance to advertise my podcast episodes. So if you go on to my Spotify account for my podcast and click follow, you will get notifications from Spotify when I upload a new podcast, because especially during the winter, there's times, weeks in a row that I just won't go on Facebook or Instagram. So, but I want you to know there's an episode. So if you just follow on Spotify. And one more thing, I will have a link if anyone would like to donate towards the running costs of this podcast. I would really, really appreciate. I'll put my PayPal link on and my Buy Me a Coffee one, but there's a minimum of €3 I think on the thing. So like even whatever you can, I would really appreciate that. And just having you here, really grateful for that, because without ye I wouldn't be sitting down to record, so I appreciate that. And I'm just sending you so much love for this Samhain portal. I hope that you get out and celebrate on the land somewhere, or gather in community or tribe, have some crack agus ceol, as well as all this shadow work. As I said, there is I have a sound meditation and activation from last year on my podcast. And just to sum things up, I suppose inner child healing is when we're healing the inner child, we're doing deep ancestral healing work. We're healing ancestral trauma. And, you know, yeah, I forgot to say this earlier on, if we were traumatized at eight, for example, and we don't heal that, we can be at the emotional age of an 8-year-old, even as 30-something-year-olds. So, you know, it's really important to deepen our emotional intelligence by healing these wounded parts of ourselves. I mean, I think I've got the point across. Heal the wounded inner child, see how they're doing, give them love, you know, ask them what they want. Maybe they want to go for a walk in the forest or go to the sauna or probably like paint or art or music or dance. Just tend to our wounded inner children this Samhain season. So yeah, Sinead, ma anam cardja, that's it for now. Thank you for joining me here. Sending so much love from this beautiful land in County Kerry. And I will chat to you soon. Take care. Slán go fóill.